everybody. Welcome and good on you coming today to this important event. This is the sovereignty, talking sovereignty in the time of the voice. Really important that you're here. And first up, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the country that we're on at the moment, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nations. We're in Naarm, Melbourne. It's wonderful to be here, and it's great that we've got the sovereignty panel ready to speak about sovereignty in such an important time in our political history. I don't know, such an important time, but it sure calls for people to stand up and do something about it. It's great to have you all here. I just encourage everybody to move to the front if you get a chance. You know, it's a black sovereign movement, but it's not blacks at the back. We need our blacks at the front right now. So I encourage everyone to move to the front. It's great that we can be close. We've also got people live streaming at the moment. So welcome to all of our live stream viewers. I hope that we're all together and joining together. That's what I'd like to also acknowledge, our ancestors. I hope that all of our ancestors are ignited and bring us here together. For our ancestors past, who started the fight, our ancestors present, who are always fighting today, and our future emerging people who are continuing the fight. It's really important that we come together and have these yarns, and it's a fantastic honour that we have our panel up here that could come together. I would like to acknowledge all the traditional owners and Aboriginal people in the audience today and on the stream, and I'd like to acknowledge all of our people that are standing with us and people that are here to speak about this important subject that's coming up that we need to discuss. First, always, we've got our housekeeping. Someone's got to do it. We've got our toilets located out in the foyer, and it's really important. Yeah, good luck making it there. You know how long it takes to get there, the Jilwar dance. This event has been live streamed, and we please ask you to not take any photos or videos, video recordings. If people could actually turn their phones off, it would be a great thing. Yes. No recordings. During the evening, we will hear from each of the panellists, and afterwards we will have a discussion on the questions that you have submitted during the time you got your tickets. We won't be taking any questions from the floor, so make sure you keep that in you, but we will always have a discussion that will continue on. Great to have you here. Tonight's event will be taking donations for the Black Sovereign Movement. The Black Sovereign Movement are First Nations elders, activists, academics and community workers that joined in our community in the battle against colonisation, our commitment to truth-telling and the value we place on our sovereignty over this land. Donations can be made by card or cash in the foyer. Tonight's event has been organised by the Black People's Union with Renegade Activists. Stop Black Deaths in Custody, National Day of Action. That will be coming up. And I'd just like to say, we've got our wonderful panellists that are here tonight. We've got Robbie Thorpe, Leah House, and Keiran Stewart-Assheton. It's wonderful to have them here. And I'd just like to make an apology from two of our wonderful panelists who couldn't make it here tonight. Lydia Thorpe, Gunai, and Chelsea. Chelsea couldn't make it, war to go. So they were both connected to deaths in custodies. And today is actually John Patt's day. He was number one of the black deaths in custody. That's when we started counting in 1983. And now, in 2023, we have over 517 deaths with 000 people being accounted for these murders. It's funny how cameras are always turned off or things are so unclear. It just makes you wonder about our deaths in custody. When I was 10, my mum actually took me to Robbie and I watched the court case. And I remember then with my 10-year-old eyes, seeing a lot of lies coming from the court, and I didn't like the system and I didn't trust it. And I'm quite sad to see that years later I'm standing here and we're counting the deaths of 517 people. So there is a day of action coming up on the 7th of October. It's coming up on the 7th of October at 1 p.m. Really important for you to get in, be a part of it. It's the Stop Black Deaths in Custody National Day of Action, October 7th, 1 p.m. Rallies are planned across the continent, and this is the time to show up. After 32 years, the recommendations of the Royal Commissions into Black Deaths in Custody still haven't been implemented. State Library at 1 p.m. on the 7th of October. State Library, 1 p.m, 7th of October. Make sure you grab some posters and flyers on your way out. Stick them up where you live. Sovereignty is the time of the voice. Sovereignty in the time of the voice. Voices. Interesting, because I really thought it was going to be a panel of 4 where we had chairs that spun around. I'm quite bewildered that we have this. It can be the start. I know that our people have lived through many things, bringing them home, native title, reconciliation, a lot of buzzwords. And I know that with reconciliation in the dictionary, two people fighting, no talk of reuniting, but we're not fighting, we just want our land. And we want our people looked after, and we want happy families. And I think it's really important that we start as a community, start somewhere, and I think this is a great thing. Black Sovereign Movement, it's really important that we know that's going on in our community. It's great that we've got our panel here today. This panel discussion has been organised as an opportunity to have a discussion for you all to hear about sovereignty and what it means, particularly now in the lead up to the referendum. Sovereignty has never been ceded. Sovereignty has never been ceded. So we are here to talk about what that is and what it looks like. First Nations people have been at the forefront of the fight for self-determination for country, land rights and sovereignty. A fight fought against successive government policies that have been designed to dehumanise, assimilate and diminish our power. I'd now like to introduce our fantastic panel who have come here today to talk on this very important topic. Please put your hands together as we hear from our panels and meet our panelists and hear what they've got to say. Our first panellist will be Keiran Stewart-Assheton, a Yuin man from the Yuin Nations, but he is a traditional owner from the Wandian country in the Yuin Nation. Keiran has a background in psychology and social policy and 15 years of experience for advocating for First Nations rights and sovereignty in the fields of health, justice, education and land rights. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for Keiran Stewart.
Thanks, Alan. Thank you everybody for coming today. I'm not going to bore you for too long. I just want to touch on a few things around, what sovereignty actually is and what the voice actually is in this constitutional recognition referendum that's coming up. So I'll just get straight into it. When we think about sovereignty, there's a lot of different things that we think about what that actually means and how we apply that to our lives. Now, when you go and look at something like the Uluru Statement of the Heart, they give a very basic definition of sovereignty. They talk about sovereignty as a spiritual notion. Now, don't get me wrong, we do have spiritual sovereignty as blackfellas, but our sovereignty is much, much more than just some romanticised spiritual notion. When we talk about sovereignty, what we're talking about is real political sovereignty. Now, sovereignty was defined a couple of hundred years ago, back in the 1640s, I think it was, in the treaties of Westphalia over in Europe. The way they defined sovereignty is they defined it as a nation who has their own lands, they've got their own land borders, and they've got their own government systems in place to manage that land and to manage their own populations. We here had sovereignty for 60,000 years or more under that exact definition. Before colonisation, we had our own territories, we had our own nations. We had our own borders for those nations, and we had our own systems in place to govern those nations and the people that lived on them. When we talk about sovereignty, that's the sovereignty we're talking about. We're not talking about some spiritual sovereignty. We're talking about the right for blackfellas to actually manage our own lands and our own affairs as we have for 60,000 years or more. Now, when we talk about the impacts on our sovereignty that this whole referendum is going to have, we're again talking about that sovereignty. Now, they talk about how it won't see sovereignty, but the sovereignty they're talking about there is that spiritual notion that they talk about in the Uluru Statement. They're not talking about our political sovereignty. Now, our political sovereignty remains unceded. It is something that we have a right to practice. But at the end of the day, rights only exist so far as you can enforce them. What we're lacking is the power and the ability to be able to enforce our sovereignty here. We've got the right for it. We've never given up that right. Our sovereignty is still unceded. We're one of the only Indigenous populations that were colonized that never ceded their sovereignty through treaties or surrenders. Our sovereignty still very much remains. What we're lacking is that power to be able to put into play. Now, there's a whole bunch of reasons for that. Obviously the colonial state, their police, their military, etc., etc. But there's also a bunch of little underhanded reasons that attack our sovereignty. Stuff like this voice proposition that's coming up. Now, I'm not necessarily against the voice body itself. Obviously, I don't support it. It's a powerless body. It's not going to do nothing. Had dozens and dozens of them going back decades and decades. None of them have achieved anything. What we are actually against here is the constitutional recognition aspect. John Howard first proposed this right back in the 90s. He then proposed it again in 2007 when he wheeled out the Northern Territory intervention. Now, I don't know how many people remember the NT intervention or are familiar with it. The NT intervention was a way for the federal government to send militaries into Indigenous communities in outback Northern Territory, to lock those communities down and to seize land back that blackfellas had been given there under native title and land grants. That's what the Northern Territory intervention was about. It was about seizing our land back. Now, our sovereignty is two aspects, our land and our governance, as I mentioned at the start there. They attacked our land. They've attacked our land for 235 years. John Howard was one of the biggest perpetrators. Keating put in the Native Title Act in 1993. As soon as Howard got elected, he spent the next 10 years putting in amendment after amendment after amendment, attacking native title and attacking land rights to try and dispossess us even further from any ability to be able to manage our lands. Now, the Northern Territory intervention was part of attacking that land, as well as the Native Title Acts. But the constitutional recognition was about attacking our ability to self-govern and our right of self-determination. Constitutional recognition was proposed as a way to cede and assimilate Indigenous sovereignty into Australia's constitution. That's what this is all about. It's not about some police body. It's not about patting yourself on the back, making yourself feel good. It's an attack on our sovereignty. It's the final nail to quote Uncle Robbie here. It's the final nail in the coffin of attacking and putting off our sovereignty. That's what it's all about. It's about taking away our right to be sovereign. They've already attacked our ability to enforce our sovereignty. Now they're coming for our right to be able to do it. That's what this whole voice proposition is about. Now, the way it does it is by putting us into this foreign constitution. We don't want to be in this constitution. We don't want nothing to do with this. Australia's constitution is the most racist constitution in the world. Did you know that we're the only constitution in the world that has race powers embedded in it? The only constitution that gives the federal parliament the ability, the enshrined ability to be able to make race-specific laws. That's the constitution that these people are trying to put us into. We don't want nothing to do with this. We don't want to be a part of that constitution. We don't want to see that sovereignty. Why would we want to? 60,000 years or more we've been sovereign people. We're the oldest society in the world. Why would we want to go and give all that up to be a part of some racist document? Now, there's a whole lot of stuff I can talk about the voice. I don't want to go into it too much. We're here to talk about sovereignty. But we can't talk about sovereignty without also talking about the voice, I suppose, at the end of the day. Now, this is the major obstacle to our sovereignty today. It's this whole proposition. Now, we don't want to be in this constitution. We don't want anything part of it. We don't even want to be a part of these conversations. And it's quite surprising that so many people are now taking up this conversation. 12 months ago, we were talking about a republic. 12 months ago, we had people right across the political spectrum, black and white, talking about abolishing the constitution, abolishing the Australian colony, and federating into a republic. Now we've got people lining up to campaign to keep that constitution, to keep that attachment to the Commonwealth and to the monarchy and to their horrendous history of genocide right across the world. What happened to the conversations about republic? What happened to the conversations about sovereignty? They're not being mentioned anymore. And again, this is part of the whole tactic. We've organised a deaths in custody rally next week. When was the last deaths in custody rallies? When was the last rallies for land rights? When was the last rallies for stolen children? The last 6 to 12 months, our energy, and not just ours in the Black Sovereign Movement or BQ, but ours in activists and organisers, black and white, has been poured into this whole tokenistic, powerless agenda, which just seeks to further assimilate us. Why? Why are we at this stage? It's quite confusing if you don't fully understand the backdrop. But the reason we're here is because first and foremost, the colony wants to remain a colony in that it wants to keep its power. Australia can only exist by exploiting and oppressing First Nations people and First Nations land. Without that oppression, without that exploitation, without our sovereignty being subdued, Australia as a nation cannot exist. Now, I'm not talking about Australia as a nation as in the citizens. I'm talking about Australia as a nation as in the structure, the government structure, the police, the military, the parliaments, all those systems that are in place that oppress not just mob, but the entire working class, black and white. Now, we've got massive problems right now with stuff like housing, with climate change, with justice, with education, with our imperialist ventures right across the world. The conversation needs to come back to prioritising sovereignty of First Nations people. because it's only through our sovereignty that we can address these issues on a wider level. Make no mistake, like Australia is not going to give this up easily. Many people think of Australia as some victim, for example, on the global stage. Australia is one of the most powerful imperialist nations in the world. Now, for those who have heard the word imperialist but might not know exactly what I'm talking about, what I'm talking about is when we talk about imperialism, we talk about a government going into other nations and stealing their resources and co-opting their governments. Now, everybody no doubt has heard about what an imperialist the United States is. Australia has a fraction of the US population. If we had the same population as America, Australia would be worse than America. We would be the #1 imperialist superpower of the world. Right now, we have imperialist interests right across the world, and these have decades. Now, there's not just the imperialism that's happening here with the occupation of 250 plus indigenous nations. Australia is a nation who has aided coups right across the world, democratically elected governments. I don't know who here has heard of Salvador Allende, the Chilean democratically elected president who was couped by the CIA. It was Australian troops that were deployed to Chile to undertake that coup. We sent manpower over there to attack other foreign governments. West Papua, right now occupied by Indonesia. Where does Indonesia get all its training and all its arms and resources from? Right here. 4 or 5 hours drive north if you're up in Benalla. Israel's the same, occupying Palestine. Israel gets so much resources from Australia, again, from Benalla, just up the road. Right now in Africa, everyone's probably heard about how France absolutely raided Africa for the last 200 years, stole all this gold. Did you know Australia's got more mines in Africa right now than any other country in the world? Over 30 African countries have Australian mines in there right now, destabilising their governments, putting their workers through horrendous practices where people are losing their lives and limbs on the job, getting paid scraps for it, while a bunch of rich white fellas over here in Australia for billions. This is the imperialism we're talking about here. Now, this is what I'm talking about when I talk about Australia as an imperialist state. This imperialist state can only exist through the occupation of our sovereign nations. It only exists as an imperialist no matter where it is in the world. It's not a valid entity. It's not legitimate. It's an illegal military occupation. It's a bunch of soldiers sitting on our land, sitting on the lands of black and brown people right across the world. When we talk about sovereignty, this is the impacts we're talking about. This is what we're up against. But sorry, I'm getting completely off track here.
No, that's true.
I can rave on about this stuff for hours. So feel free to pull me up if I go on too long. But at the end of the day, what needs to happen is we need to seize back power to be able to enforce our sovereignty. It is only through doing this that we can actually progress not just the horrific conditions that First Nations people live under, but the horrific conditions that the whole entire working class here in Australia lives under. It is only through empowering our sovereignty so that we can practice it that we're going to address anything. There's dozens and dozens of reports from right across the world that talk about the only proper way to address disproportionate health stats, disproportionate education, disproportional homelessness and unemployment and illiteracy rates, etc., is to give the people self-determination so they can manage their own affairs. Self-determination is, that self-governance I was talking about at the start. It's half of our sovereignty. It's the half that we're missing. It's what we really need. It's what's not going to be achieved through some tokenistic powerless voice that the government can and can't ignore. Can choose to ignore whenever they want to, and that the government can choose, who they're going to put on. We need to take the conversation away from these neoliberal reforms and these, tokenistic, assimilative reforms that don't actually empower us, don't give us anything, just give people an opportunity to give themselves something back and feel good. And look, I fixed the Aboriginal problem. We need to change the conversations. We need to start talking about sovereignty again. We need to start talking about a republic federation again. But I'll end it there. I'll talk a bit more for that time, but hand on to the next.
Yeah, no, great. Great, ladies and gentlemen. our different points of view and our points of view. And for people who haven't had the chance to hear it, it's wonderful to be able to just be in this space to hear all our thoughts about it. And this is something that we've all experienced and worked extensively in our community and through our life in this, dealing with this and fighting for our sovereignty. So it's wonderful to have you right here giving it to Australia. Ladies and gentlemen, Keiran, we're going to move on to our next one now. Who's come down? Sorry, that was a funny little turn. Yeah, I know, because I feel like going, any questions? So you can't do that. Exactly, and not yet. And I think it's really important just for people to hear the different points of view. Just as a thing too, I'll introduce myself. My name is Shirley Hood. I'm Nyunga Goodich Tamara, right here from WA side, Perth side, south of Perth, and South Gippsland, South East Gippsland and Goodich. So wonderful. So great to have you all here today, and we're all from different countries, but united with our spirit. He's another person in our union of spirit here, from Canberra, flew in from Canberra today. It's wonderful. Put your hands together. Thanks for coming down. Leah House. Leah House is a Ngambri Ngunnawal woman. She is currently working at the Human Rights Commission Victims of Crime, supporting Aboriginal men, women and children impacted by crime. She is the Vice President of the Black People's Union. Ladies and gentlemen, Leah House. Yeah, you can just talk normally. How you going, Leah? Did you have a good flight?
Follow that up. Serious?
Of course we're serious. We don't always get told how brilliant, but there we go.
Wow.
You with that business?
Oh my gosh, shut up. I'm so sorry. I have no idea what I've agreed to. I've had 48 hours notice to come here. I'm from Canberra, so I jumped on a plane and got here. I can't follow that up at all. Hi everyone, my name's Leah. I'm a Neighbourhood Wiradjuri woman. I'm from Canberra. I work with victims of crime at the Human Rights Commission. And so I work with families impacted by crime. I cross paths with Lydia while she's in Canberra a lot, because the space that I do work a lot in is within our jails. So that's where we cross over with the deaths in custody stuff, but I also do a lot of work down at the embassy with the working group down there. Matilda House was one of the people down there back in 1972 when it was established. I think sometimes the women get left out of that dialogue. We all know the men that were there, and we talk about the men that created it, but we leave out conveniently the women that were also there. But yeah, I guess I think, how do I follow that up? I agree. I am here under duress. I'm having these conversations under duress. We're being dragged down this pathway to this referendum, whether we like it or not. And that's just the one thing that really overarches everything that I'm doing and talking about, is that I've not chosen to be in this position. I've not chosen to participate in this. It's just been forced on us, as has everything else this colony has forced on us for the last 230 plus years. I think the only thing I'm going to add to what Keiran was saying was just that argument that our sovereignty will not be ceded through this process. And I think it's really easy for the Yes campaign to say that and to fall short, leave it there, that our sovereignty won't be ceded, because it really falls short of what it is what sovereignty they're referring to. And if you do bring it back to that Uluru statement, it's a very tokenistic spiritual idea of sovereignty, and we know that that's not what sovereignty is. But it's very convenient and easy for the government and their lawyers and their constitutional recognition lawyers, all the people that they've got in that camp to say that our sovereignty won't be ceded, because at the end of the day, we're not enforcing our sovereignty. And they know that, we know that, we're not enforcing our sovereignty. We don't have the power to enforce our sovereignty. So it's all well and good to say your sovereignty is not ceded through this process, because, well, what are we doing right now to enforce it? It's not, we can't. So that line that's coming out of that side is just really irritating, because it just falls so short of the entirety of that conversation. And I think it's not really reflecting on an international stage our sovereignty, because internationally, if we look about our role in the international community, I've lost my train of thought, but no, on the international stage, it is going to be perceived on an international level of our sovereignty being ceded, whether we like it or not, because on the international level, we are saying yes to being governed by this colony. And I think there's a very big argument to be made in the international community that is us ceding our sovereignty. It's not dotting the line, we're not signing anything, but on the international stage, we have said yes, and we are allowing ourselves to be governed. And we know we're not, but on the international stage, how is that perceived? And I guess that's my concern. And that, yeah, when I think about it like that, I can't follow it up, that's why I'm leaving it there, gone.
Fantastic, Leah, and that's what it's about, hey, just us being able to share our life opinion as we go through live life. I mean, you must do a lot in victims of crime area. Do you see a lot of Aboriginal people going through that system?
Well, I think I was going to, there's questions that I was going to respond to that in, but yeah, obviously, as sovereign people, and that's this argument from the Yes camp is your sovereignty is not ceded, you're still sovereign people. That's all well and good, but if Australia genuinely did recognise us as sovereign people, if Australia genuinely recognised us as sovereign people, then in what world do they have the authority to be locking up black bodies? That's a war crime. If we are sovereign people and they respect us and acknowledge us as sovereign people, then why are they locking us up? They don't have any authority over our bodies or our lands, but they don't view us as sovereign people. They have paternalistic views of us. They view us as their property. That's why we get labelled Indigenous Australians. We're not Australia's property. We're not Australia's good little Aborigines. Help me out. Give it to me. Hey.
And that definitely is the thing, you know, across the world, we've gone through a lot of these like buzzwords and buzz decisions and buzz movements that are not driven by us. This is another thing that's sort of not driven by us, and all of a sudden it becomes a massive issue and a massive bundle that we have to choose between giving up. But we won't give up, and it's great to see our sovereignty. We have to keep pushing our sovereignty because we've never said yes. Which is great. I'm really happy to introduce our next panel. I've worked extensively throughout 3CR community radio, speaking with our community in the prison systems throughout. We'd like to go into the prisons and get the stories from our brothers and sisters on the inside who don't get the chance to voice. And it's really important. I know I do go through a lot of avenues to get people's voice who don't get a chance to voice. And I know Robbie has been through many worlds, but he's been in the world from, like, you've been around this stage, around this area before, hey, as a champion boxer. Hey, the champion it's called. But ladies and gentlemen, I mean, from brilliant kids that are continuing all over the place, such strong work in different areas. He's always been an advocate, and yeah, I've got right here, local legend and lifetime warrior. Ladies and gentlemen, and a man I dearly love and always in our community with brilliant and lots to say. Really important that we hear this. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for Mr. Robbie.
Thanks everyone, and thanks for coming tonight. Just want to acknowledge all the ancestors of what is known as Victoria, all the ancestors who lie dead on the battlefield of Victoria. And I don't think people realise the gravity of this crime scene. And if it continues to be a crime, because this country never got consent from the original people of the land. You know, to occupy our land or apply their backward dark age law here. As we know, the High Court determined that this wasn't a terra nullius, but it didn't mention whether it was a sovereignty nullius. Was it a land without law? No. In fact, we have a law here, established, sustainable, stood the test of time. It served our people very well. It's very sophisticated law, beyond the comprehension, it seems, of the colonisers. They've never recognised us, our humanity, our human rights. Never. They've assumed that they're some sort of superior to us and applied their law like we didn't exist. So the whole country is a crime scene as far as I'm concerned. The entire country. And every time they try to make laws for our people in this country, is another act of continuing genocide of our people. They're failing to recognise our sovereignty, which is an act of genocide. In fact, if you have a look at the act, known as the Convention for the Prevention and the Punishment for the Crime of Genocide, there's no doubt about it, Australia is guilty of everything written in that act. That was the New World Order back in the late 40s. People need to read the ratification debate around the Genocide Convention and hear what the Labor Party people were saying in that debate. Read the Hansard. You get an idea of what the Labor Party's really all about. You know, they've been around a lot longer than the Liberal Party. Had plenty of opportunities to secure our rights. Never did nothing. So, you know, currently we're talking about a voice to Parliament, recognition in a foreign constitution. And why in the hell would Aboriginal people in their right mind want to be a part of it? What's in it for us? The Constitution is racist. That's the number one reason I don't want to be a part of it. It's racist. Why are we being forced to recognise the white man's sovereignty? Why do they recognise our sovereignty? Pretty simple, isn't it? Australia's in a deep state of denial. The evidence is everywhere. It's criminal on every level. Now, what do you take us for? We are human beings. We want our most basic and fundamental human rights recognised before you go attacking us on the back of your racist foreign constitution. And we deserve a bit more than that. And You're right, Keiran, we need to act sovereign. We can't protect it unless we do actions to protect it. And that is, we haven't got the guns, no one's supplying us guns. We can't defend ourselves like that. So we've got to be realistic. We've got to do this in the courts, for whatever that's worth. The Australian courts we're not going to get to see justice there. This whole country is based on denying us our human rights and sovereignty, denying it. So we're not going to do any good there. We need to go to the International Criminal Court, set up for the very purposes of what we're talking about here today. It's been established since 2000, I think. And that's where we need to be. And we need to be making claims on every one of the mob here. There's something like 300 sovereign black nations with the right to self-determination and sovereignty. That's what we're entitled to. And we owe it to our ancestors and our children's children. And we're only here as the custodians of this land. We're looking after it for our children. That's all. We don't know none of it. We've got a job, responsibility. And we are the sovereign people here. Because this country doesn't recognise the true sovereigns, it gets trashed, right? If you want to protect the land, you need to recognise the sovereignty over it. If you want to promote the idea of, I call him Chuck the Turd, Charles the Third. That's what we have to do. Every other country, British colony around the world, celebrates the day they booted the crown out of their country. What does Australia do? It's time to get real, folks. We're able to charge this country with the crimes of genocide if we've got the support. And we've got a long history of these claims. Going back to John Howard, who was the architect of constitutional recognition, if people remember him going back that far. So this whole idea of the yes and the no, they're both from the same parliament, the same constitution, controlling both sides of the debate. And it was the Liberal Party who established constitutional recognition. Scummo, Abbott, and what's his name? Howard. They've come up with this. Dutton. It's the Liberal Party's proposal in the first instance. And how come they're talking no? It's a scam. It's to chop out people, cut us out of the picture. We're the no. We're the real no. We're the sovereign no. The other side of it's racist. We can clearly see through that, can't we? What we need to do is court cases. And currently, Australia is trying to intervene in the Ukraine-Russia issue, quoting the Genocide Convention in this country. And we know for a fact Australia is not a credible witness. So we want to intervene in there. And what's wrong with the black sovereign nations intervening in the International Criminal Court? What we need support on the ground. And the sovereignty people got nothing. There was a voice for Canberra going back 50 years. It's called the Aboriginal Tent Embassy. That was a sovereign voice that came. And that parliament never had the decency to walk 100 metres over 50 years to engage with that voice. That tells me the story of this country. It's a disgrace to all humanity. And you know the very worst of these colonies is? Victoria. I'll tell you why. Because this is the first one to the Constitution. 1851. That was the real terra nullius constitution right there. Not on Rhode Island. Here is where it began. All the other colonies around the place copied it. Victoria. They all come off the back of this one. It's premeditated, calculated, intentional, genocide. It doesn't give you sovereignty. Colonisers. What are you thinking? Now we need to get into the International Criminal Court with our case here. There's urgency about it. You know, if you look at genocide, you'll realise that there's a parallel between ecocide and a parallel between suicide ultimately. It's a suicidal mission. Right? This is where we're at. We never ceded our sovereignty, the law over this land, ever. And we never will. It's not up to any Aboriginal person to cede that sovereignty. They haven't got the right to do it. Right? Nobody has. And we can never give it up. And that's it. That's only how we think and believe ourselves. All right? I remember my mother saying to me once, as long as one person's thinking about genocide, the issue's still alive. And back in the day, there wasn't many people thinking about it. Okay. So we've got just courts. In any court you want to take us to, we need to get there. And we need the support of the conscientious people in this country who are the beneficiaries of this criminal genocide. You know, we need the means to get to the International Criminal Court, or at least be able to produce the documentation to serve on these people. I think that's the best thing we can do, rather than shoot and car bombs and shit like that. But, you know, that's not our style. We're civilised people. We're full of law. We all know this. The people who are lawless and mindless are the colonisers. And they make up 97% of the population. 97% of the people come from the Northern Hemisphere. That's an act of genocide, if it ever was. It's very clear-cut, Australia. The forced removal of Aboriginal children is an act of genocide. Killing members of the group is an act of genocide. Creating the conditions of life with the intent to destroy is an act of genocide. Preventing births. In fact, if you look at the Act, there's nothing in the Act that Australia's not guilty of. Are you all happy with this situation? Huh? Bad luck. The plan to exterminate us didn't work. We're still here. And we want our human rights recognised. Not tomorrow, today. How dare you? How dare this country? It's a sickness here. You know, denialism is a mental illness. So is racism and sexism. Our people realised, I think it was about the 14th of April 1770, on the 90-mile beach, Point Hicks they call it, when Cook was seen. We knew then this was a zombie apocalypse. We've been living with that knowledge the entire time. But we've been managed by these imbeciles who are made living and managing our affairs. We don't need your management. We need our human rights recognised. We need to get the jackboots off our neck. This is all going to be played out sooner or later. It's in the interest of doing the right thing, Australia. Even your own Crown said, get consent to negotiate. Didn't happen. Lied. That's why we're here today. Can't act legally, morally, ethically. This country. That's why you're not a sovereign. It never changed. There was no negotiation to change this from being our law to white man's law. It never changed under our craving law, no law. We still hold our sovereign right here. And we have a law. We have a proper law. We have a high level law. You ever heard of totems? That's the divine. It's way beyond this backward, dark age, greed-driven crap that we're all living with. All slaves. Slaves to a rotten, racist constitution. We can do better. You have to put up with it. We hold the secret here. We've got the just cause support us. We can nail them. Australia's like a Nazi wet dream. It's a crime scene. Continuing. Everyone's the beneficiary. You don't want that to be the case, do we? You want your kids to inherit this? No, you're obliged to do something. All the wealth that you got here, where do you think you got that from? When the convicts turned up, they had nothing. Nothing. All the wealth is stolen. I don't know if my mate Len's there, but he's a lawyer that I've worked with in about 6 cases against the Commonwealth. You know, genocide cases, where we proved to be correct. And the federal court judge, can't just think of his name at the moment, but he actually came down to the embassy and said, you're right, there's ample evidence to prove that genocide happened, but you've got to have to improve the intent. You know, that's pretty clear to me. You know, terror analysis intent, white only policy constitutions intent, living in concentration camps intent, all these massacres across this state here is intent. We're not in the constitution, that's more intent. You're not recognising our sovereignty, that's more intent. We want to be in our rightful place here. This is not England. This is not Africa. This is not India. It's none of them. It's spoken for, every square inch. We want restitution. We want restoration. Can you do it? We're entitled to that, aren't we? Stop treating us like we don't exist. This is not sovereignty, nonetheless. There is law here. Acknowledge it. It's in your own interests. That's why you've got an environmental catastrophe and a biological disaster, because you've got no respect for the customary law. So we never ceded our sovereignty. End of story. And just recently, the place called the Europe Truth Commission was established a couple of years ago. On the 27th of April this year, the state government lawyer admitted that the Aboriginal people had never ceded their sovereignty here in Victoria. A couple of weeks later, the Commissioner of Police said, yes, we have been profiling the Aboriginal people over the time. Okay? When's that all going to come out? People had a look at the genocide, the massacre map lately across this continent. It's growing daily. It completely covers the map. People don't understand the gravity of crime seen in Australia. Australia. What a name. Australia, are you Australians? That's not the name of this country, by the way. What a stupid name. You know? We can do better. We can live with the devil we do know. All right. It's time to get rid of these criminal multinationals who are tearing this place apart. How do you think you're going to stop that? Recognise the true sovereigns of the land. That's how you stop the multinationals. All right? We can take care of you. We can liberate you. Take the chains off your neck and hands. Liberate you. We hold the key. And our people, our ancestors, our elders who fought to hold on to this, have kept this window open for all of humanity. It's time to back us up right now. We can boot them out of here. We can have something that we really get our teeth into. All of us, this is enough. It's a critical factor here. You know, our sovereignty movement's grown exponentially. When I was knocking around back in the day, it was a handful of people. Now it's grown. People understanding these issues. We shouldn't be jumping into this constitution right now. You know, it's a mistake. It's a big mistake. And what it is to me is the people who come up, the architects of this voice, are the same people who are responsible for the gap. They've been sitting there as the advisors to the government for the last 40 years. Same architects around native title, NT intervention, all of those things, same people. Now it's time to knock them out. And not just them, it's the corporations. Corporations aren't Aboriginal law. Corporations don't recognise the elders. There's no space for elders in the corporations that I know about. The native title and the cultural heritage. They cut out the elders business. So they can speak on their behalf, misrepresent. They're totally unaccountable. Now, if you really want to find out why the gap is there, do a forensic audit on these corporate bodies over the last 40 years. And you'll see what's happening. It's all there, folks. What a total failure. And why would you want to enshrine that in your constitution, that sort of failure? Why would you want to do that? You know what? Because in Australia's interest to absorb us, Aboriginal people, who have these sovereign rights, unceded sovereign rights, it's in the interest of the wider community to absorb us into their constitution. So it's like a nail in the coffin for us. We can see it very clearly. If anyone in this room here can tell me one law that was ever made for our people at a local, state, federal or Commonwealth level that was any good, just one, let me know. Tell me one law that they made for us that was any good. So why do you think this one's going to be any good? You think it's what we want? I don't even know who asked for the voice. Where did it come from? We were talking about constitutional recognition. All of a sudden, this voice pops out of left field. That's what it wasn't about. It wasn't the focus. And they're desperate. They're desperate, and they're trying anything now. But don't weaken here, you know. It doesn't matter which way it goes either, yes or no. You know. It's the day after. And that's when it can really start, things can really start, because they've played their hand the first time, really, in a sense. And the longer it goes, the more people are going to be more aware of what our situation is here. Because they've been kept in deliberately. Most people never clue about Aboriginal people and their rights in this country. Going to school, what do you learn? All the institutions are a party to this. It's all of government. It's a bipartisan approach to this assimilation into the Constitution too. You know? It's a scam that the Liberal Party acting like they're the native rights. And the Labor Party, you know. It's a toss-up for me which is the worst, the most racist out of those two I think I'd rather work with an overt racist than a covert one. Because that's what the Labor Party, they're the covert racists who do more damage to our people than the Liberal can. Now, if you have a look at the history, you have a look at the sly Labor government and what they've been doing over the decades. So think about it, folks, when you go voting. We can do better. We can remove the foreign constitution out of here. Now, most other, like I said, most other Commonwealth, British colonies around the world celebrate the day they threw the British out of their country. What does Australia do? They celebrate the day they came. You know, it's very backward, folks. And it's been outside out of mind and been able to get away from what. Those days are over now. The world's changed. And we're not going anywhere. And if there's only just one of our people, you know, what happens to us happens to this land. Let us think about that. And that's the genocide ecocide. You shoot yourself in the foot there. You paint yourself into a corner because you're not prepared to act legally, morally, ethically. And that's, now we pay a big price for that. But I think everyone, you know, can see this now. It's not that hard. You know, we're going to remove these criminals out of the system. Get them out of there. You've all failed to prevent it. No one's been punished for this crime of genocide. That's where we need to go. This is where we can open it right up here. But you don't need to panic. We can take this with us. But we need support. We need support to do what we need to do. And I think we need to deliver a writ or something to that effect in the International Criminal Court, which is specifically set up for these sort of things and this purpose. So, you know, and the people here, that's enough. That's a network of people that can do the job. You know, you don't need people that manage websites and, you know, have a concerted attack on this right at this moment, and I reckon it'll buckle and fall over. This whole planet's just about had it. It's on fire. It needs the original people's law, if it ever did need it. You know? And we used to hold to that. And that's what our sovereignty is, unceded. And our law is not about the same as a white man's law. It's all encompassing. As a child, you get brought into it. Yes. There's no one who doesn't understand the law in this country, black far away. So that's a far better law, folks. And it's stood the test of time. It's proven law. So if you're interested in your own survival, you should recognise the customary law of this land.
Ladies and gentlemen, and it's great to see, because what you were saying, Robbie, we've seen the change. I remember with my parents who grew up on like Nazi camps that were put in place to look after our children, you know, that happened for generations right up to my mum and dad, you know. So think of, if your children are taken from you, what language are they learning? What morals are they learning? You know, we have got 20,000 of our children in white care as we speak, right? They're the statistics. 20,000 of our children who are taken from their mothers and brought up white with the promise of a better life. I know that my dad went through a Nazi camp. You know, we called them missions. We still have connections to those places because that's where we were forming identities, you know. But in '63, it took a lot of power for Aboriginal people to stand up and say, we're not going to be that anymore. We're coming into the society. We're going to be here. And we're called to be citizens of this country, there was the referendum in 67. Where finally, well, I don't know. I think they got flora, because our parents were born flora and fauna. Were you born flora and fauna? Yeah, see, Robbie was born flora and fauna, and I just made it in. And it's like, it never made a difference. If I was born a citizen, like I went through schooling and rah, and I worked my guts off to become the best I could be, only to be retold and told again at 15, 16, 17, that you're not gonna go on to do something. You're gonna be a failure. Just get into like life. We're not pushed. And that goes for all of our children. We don't see them working as checkout chicks, as in the fast food industry. They don't get the same rights as other children to budget. We don't get that chance because of our people, because of our skin. Everybody has that same sort of weird feeling against us, and we don't know what it is. And we're a giving people. And if you know us, you come into our family, you will be, family for the rest of our lives. And it's a shame that our spirit, in that sense, is not being encouraged to thrive. And we've seen that, and we need our children to have a chance. But it can't be done the way that the government has thrust upon us, this thing to become a part. And I know myself, I don't trust what they're going to do with that power. I don't trust. And they've tried it before, and I think from our panellists, we've heard that. And this is what we're looking for. We're trying to find a place, and we're telling you again, the only place that we can properly be ourselves is with our own sovereignty. So we are going to go on to some questions now that have been submitted when everybody got their tickets. So I'm going to hand and just give questions and encourage our different panels to answer. Our first question that people have asked, and we're going to get Keiran to deal with it, is what happens after the referendum? Keiran, let's go.
Yeah, that's a really good question. A lot of ways to answer that. I suppose.
We're allowed, right there. Yeah, because you just had a good talk. It's really a lot for our panelists to be here, give such a personal thing, and I know, Robbie, like this comes from our heart, and Keiran and Leah, and it's wonderful to have this. So make sure we get a drink of water and enjoy ourselves too, eh? Yeah. So come on then, Keiran, what happens after the referendum?
Yeah, so look, after the referendum, there's a few things that needs to happen. I think one of the main things that needs to happen is we need to actually recognise where we live and what sort of society we live in. Now, a lot of people are thinking that this is a good proposal because it comes from Labor. A lot of people got caught up in this false dichotomy of Labor good, Liberal bad. There's about this much difference between Labor and Liberal. And in fact, as Uncle Robbie was saying, in a lot of ways, especially when it comes to mob, Labor's a lot worse than Liberal. Now, this is no endorsement of Liberal National Party, don't get me wrong, but Labor's actually worse when it comes to black affairs. Look at all the stuff Labor has done, and we're still under this false illusion that they're good. Right now, a couple of weeks ago, Queensland Labor government, what do? Suspend the Human Rights Act so they can lock 10-year-old kids up in adult prisons indefinitely. What else has the Queensland Labor government done? Extinguish native title, so Adani can go to Weinstein, because a lot of black folks didn't want their land ripped up. So the government took their native title away, gave the land to Adani to go rip it up for profit. Federal government, Albanese promised that he would end the Northern Territory intervention if he was elected. What did he do earlier in the year? Rolled it out into even more communities and further enforced it and further, embedded it into even more legislation so it will be even harder to get rid of in the future. Same as the cashless welfare card. Now that's not just in NT, that's in Queensland and WA now too. This is Labor good. Why are we all in this false delusion that Labor's good? You're not looking at things objectively. You're not comparing the society we live in objectively. We're not comparing it to the rest of the world. We're comparing Labor to Liberal. Compare a piece of crap to another piece of crap. One's going to look great, but at the end of the day, they're both, what are they? You know what I mean? And this is where we're stuck at the moment. So what we need to do post-referendum, he said something else. We need to look at how we assess this government. We need to look at how we, allow this government to control us and to control our thought process is what I'm talking about here. To control the narrative, to control society's psyche. We need to take that power away from them. We need to understand what it is we're actually up against. We need to fight against that. Australia is a horribly racist nation. Don't get me wrong. It's the most racist nation there is. It is. I'm not just saying that because I'm a black fellow. I'm not just saying that for dramatic effect. Where do you think South Africa got their apartheid policies from? Queensland government. Look at all the other horrible stuff that's going on. Where was the biggest genocide in the world? Here in Australia, 98% of the population were wiped out. 98% of the entire race. Nowhere in world history has there ever been such a large genocide of a single race. Nowhere. Labor's behind all this as well. Who do you think it was that put in that White Australian policy? It wasn't Liberal, it was Labor. This is the legacy of your colony. This is what we live under. Now, why is LNP on the no side if it's, such a bad thing for black fellas and it was an LNP initiative? It's pretty easy if you think about it. They're not in power. They want support, they want power. What's the best way to do that? To appeal to 75% of the population who have anti-Indigenous sentiments. 75% of Australians hold anti-Indigenous sentiments. Turn around and say, no, we're not going to give the black fellas even scraps at the table. Of course you're going to get a lot of support from the Australian population. That's what it's about. That's what their objection is about. It's got nothing to do with actually stopping us or stopping this proposal from going through. It's just a power grab for them. And it's a way for them to drum up culture war even more. So we're all distracted, fighting in amongst each other instead of directing our anger where it should be. Together, united. So after the referendum, what needs to happen, regardless of what the outcome is, we need to look at how we move forward. How we move forward from the colony. Why are we still indulging in this colonial fantasy? Why aren't we looking at actually progressing ourselves? Australia as a nation is only 122 years old. It's a very young nation. The next rite of passage for this nation is meaningful revolt, meaningful revolution, meaningful changes at every level of society, systemic changes that benefit the entire working class. It's time for us to grow up instead of living in this juvenile, racist fantasy land. Yeah, that's what needs to happen after the referendum. People need to learn, people need to educate themselves, people need to get on board. People need to dream bigger. Stop thinking that, I have to vote yes, because what's the alternative? Tell you to go jump off a cliff, you're going to say, I need an alternative, I'm not going to do that. No, you don't need an alternative not to do a harmful thing, but there is alternatives. The alternative is we stop indulging in these tokenistic, assimilative reforms. The alternative is that we put in our big boy pants and we go out and we actually make meaningful change. We actually do something. We actually organise. We actually start building towards, the republic that we were talking about only 12 months ago. So that's what needs to happen after the referendum. Yes or no, the BPU is still going to continue its work after the referendum. On the 15th of October, when I wake up, regardless of the result, I'm not going to go, if it's no result, I'm not going to turn around and go, that's my job done. The colony's problems are fixed. It's a long process. We're going to keep fighting this every day, regardless of the outcome of the referendum. That being said, obviously you want a no outcome. A yes outcome just means there's an extra obstacle we have to get past. But post-referendum, things got to keep happening. Things got to keep moving.
That's right. And exactly. And it has to do with all of our style of education, I think, coming out. I mean, our kids think of, we think of cosmos and we think of the brilliant world that we live in. We make sticks come back, crying out loud. That's how good we are. And it's so our kids and our natural people think of how sticks can come back. And then we're told dumb in this education system because we don't know Kurt. Please. We need to start having a look at how we educate our people. I know from a young age, we were never told when all of us kids were in the house, our mums and aunties told us to get outside, run around, get all your energy out, then come back when you're ready to settle. Our white friends were told when they mucked up to get in the room, shut the door, don't talk to anyone, think about it, and don't come out until you've thought about it. And I never sort of got it because it was well, who are you talking to? Are you responding? Do you know what you did wrong? I feel they run the prison system is the same. And that's what I think what we're talking about is really getting to the Aboriginal spirit. We want all your kids to be thinking how sticks can maybe come back. What is it in the cosmos? How do we fix homelessness? Stop playing games in space when we should be looking at humanism. I think that's a good point. And they do keep us busy. They've got everybody running to alarms that go off in the morning, alarms that go off at night, alarms to get over there. When has anybody had the time to have a discussion about the true Aboriginal spirit of this world? Of this world. Everybody has come to us from around the world. Everyone has come to us. We haven't had a lot of recognition from communities or world, And I know that if I had to go and live on other people's land, even as we move around Australia, we live on other people's land. We have to acknowledge and we have to give respect. And I thought, we're only 3%. If 97% of the world come to us for safety, for life, for true air, for true water, why aren't people acknowledging and giving us the true respect? More questions. We've got our next one who, is going to be looked after by Robbie. Robbie, and for people out there, if the referendum is successful in ceding a sovereign voice, what do we do to protect Indigenous rights and sovereignty thereafter?
I don't think we can't cede our sovereignty, so the referendum is not going to make a difference to that,
Exactly.
They've tried a lot of laws to undermine who we are and our laws. It's because they have a referendum. It's offensive and insulting. Why are we being asked to recognise a foreign sovereign and they won't recognise ours? So, think about that. So, but I don't think we can ever lose our sovereignty. It just is, right? It was there from the beginning. Like I said before, we're just the custodians of that. caretakers and the guardians of that sovereignty. And it's our job to hand it on to our children. It gets taken on by our children. Now, no one can negotiate away. Because it's not theirs to do that. So you've got to work within those parameters of that sovereignty. You know, this is the law of the land. You don't mess with that. Most people say our law comes from the beginning. It's not man-made, it's not woman-made. It's got a spiritual element to it. It's never changed, ever. And just because the colonisers turned up here, still didn't change. And the other side of it, there's no consent to evidence that it did change. There's no peaceful settlement here. We all grew up with this idea that this land was peacefully settled. Can you show us any documents? Isn't a settlement a document? A settlement? Can't see it. So we haven't ceded our sovereignty, and we never can do it anyway. It's non-negotiable. All right. Now, when I'm thinking treaty, I'm thinking the first cab off the rank is sovereignty is non-negotiable. Even our war crimes. So that's the sort of treaty I'm talking about, and resolving that issue. Now, you come to someone else's country, you go through their customs, right? That's the problem. Don't bring your crap law here. It's rubbish. It's backward. It's dark age shit. It's meaningless. It's not the law of this land.
Yeah.
So, until you can come to terms with those simple facts, we're not going anywhere. But it is the way to fight. Now, do you want to stand on the side of the true sovereigns, or do you want to support the foreign? You know, where do you stand? It's not a convict penal colony anymore, is it? You're not bound by these people. There's a different law applies here. If you recognise it, we'll cut your taxes in half. We can cut a better deal for you. Right? All the money that, you know, the biggest landowner in this country is? Charles III. Now, how come? Just take that off them. They're criminals. Take it off them. We've got just cause. We just need the support of the people. You know, there's a much better deal under our law than the foreign law here. That makes sense to me. That's where the future needs to be. And that's the protection of our sovereignty.
That's right.
If the people recognise it. And it's in your interests. It doesn't mean we're going to throw you out. We don't build fences and jails and things like that. It's not our style. We're beyond that crap. You know, we're a share-based economy. Something beyond the comprehension of the capitalist greedy coloniser, right? They've got no idea what the hell that is. Now, if you look at this land before colonialism, it was a pristine environment. You could actually drink the water. You could breathe the air. The food was clean. And the people were very, very healthy. Even Cook's journals will tell you, very manly looking people were, right? Very impressed. Had wanted nothing. You know, this whole idea that we need white man and their civilization, you know, that's the very last thing we need or want. And I keep asking, who even asked for this? You know, we want to be a part of your constitution, do we? I don't remember being one to be a part of that shit. Who's talking on our behalf? The architects. The architects, the ones, the advisors, the token advisors that have been there running with the government for the last 40 years. They've created the gap. Now, these corporations have created the gap. They're directors and CEOs. They're not the elders, but they're representing them. And these people are totally unaccountable. They don't even account to the tax department. They've got a licence to fail and make sure Aboriginal people don't see the light of day. You know, initially, the original organisations back in the 70s were run by Aboriginal people under our self-determination. All right? There was no government. There's none. And we created those organisations in spite of the government's duty of care and fiduciary obligation. And these were very successful organisations, are pioneering holistic health concepts. But they was all taken over by the corporation, which undermined our community control, self-determination, and the principles of sovereignty. So this is what we're living in now is this toxic mimic. Aboriginal organisation I'm talking about. They're a toxic mimic of what self-determination and community control was. So they're useless. And this voice to Parliament is like a reward for these people over the last 40 years for their gap-making enterprises and destitution that they've caused to Aboriginal people. Aboriginal people I'm talking about. They did this. Assimilated ones. The ones running with the state. In bed with them. Mining companies too, now. Big time. They're the ones you're voting for here. So, I don't think we can ever give our sovereignty. It's just been undermined here. It's an attack. It's an assault and affront on our self-determination and sovereignty. This token advisory voice, that's what it is. And I think everybody knows. We're not stupid here. We've been at this game for a long time. This seems like the last throw of the dice for the state in terms of trying to get this over the line. How long have they been at it, trying to assimilate us into the Constitution? 667. Now, I'm not a citizen. I don't vote. I don't know why I'm here. Actually, I don't vote. Why would I? I don't support you. I don't believe in you. So that's my take on it. And I think the more that we can do that, stand up. You know? Stand up, people. You know? And I really believe that because Australia's a lying, murdering thief, right, got no real substance about them, I think if the people stood up, they will fall over. And that's just a matter of us, the people, standing up to this criminality here and taking them on, you know. What else you to do? What better you got to do here? I've got nothing better to do with my life than to get rid of this criminal, this genocidal criminal. And like I said, the effect on the land genocide has is ecocide. And that pushes all Aboriginal people's buttons. Is the land is sacred to us. It's not a commodity. It's something real. It's our identity and everything else tied up in that. And we don't sell it. We don't sell our mother like some people. We don't trade on that. And that's what keeps it. It keeps it precious. And we teach our kids that. So we can never give up our sovereignty, no matter what happens. That's right. And as it goes on further, we're going to grow stronger and stronger. And even this is an example of our growing sovereign movement. Yeah, that's the way out of here, folks, for all people. And I'd just like to pay my respect to my ancestors and all the elders who held on to that sovereignty, because it's just here. It's in our minds. And no one can take that away from us. So, despite what happens, we're going to come back stronger and harder, and they're playing their hand now. Now we can come back, after this October 14th vote, just take stock of it from there and go from there, or we could do something in the lead up to it as well, you know, depends which way we want to roll on it, but, you know, we've got just cause votes.
That's right. And I love the way you brought in, we've got spirit, we've got world that we can teach. Nobody's even looked at us in that way. They look at us as they've seen us sort of in the white world living. But we've got colour coding going on, haven't we? Like we live black and white in this same world. But the truth about our sovereignty, I think about like how long we've been in this country, right? We've been here, we say about 120,000 years, right? But the white scientists have looked and they say 65,000 years. 65,000 years, if you were to draw a line of 65,000 years, that line would probably, if we did it, see the red there? If we had like a line that long, 65,000, and then you think, what year are we in at the moment? 2023. So from 65,000, then you get 2023. That's a little line here. It's a little tiny part of that. And then you think, okay, white men have been in Australia for 230 years, give or take around that. So if you go 65,000 years, 2023 years, 230 years is a dot compared to our life. And I think if you draw it like that, you can see whose house you live in. That's sovereignty, and it won't change whether people are or not. And I think it's something that the whole of Australia have to ask themselves, like really what they're doing here. Like even one of the kids brought up the other day, why is everything built so skinny? You know? And I said straight away, because the architecture comes from England. They're trying to fit on that little tiny island. We're big. And we've got different stars and sky that they don't know either. At different seasons. And we ain't just got 4, man. We got 6 and 8, and we do everything big and passionate. And I think it's really beautiful because our natural presence is really beautiful and wise. And it's really important that Australia comes to see this, you know, because we will take it back. And it's better for us to have this conversation than our kids' and your kids'. Hey. Okay, time is flying. Yeah, good. We're not finished yet, we've just got a few questions, but we're going to speed these questions up and just sort of give a strong, hard run, fly through it, and we're going to get it. Only because, I mean, you know, it takes more than a few hours to discuss this stuff, you know, and it's great that we were even able to put our dream time and our dream time into this really tight space. But the architecture does not come from us. So I think that's a great thought for tonight, you know, and I hope people just take away a few little things that help you question what's going on in your family and where do you want your kids to learn and how do you want your kids to be connected to this country? Totems. We're people and we're animals together. So we have this connection. Okay, because we all can take ages to get through this. It's so important and I really hope that people have picked on something that they can take further, you know. We're going to go to Black Deaths in Custody now. We're going to go Leah. You've got a question, Leah. This is from all of the audience. This is from all of you, so it's great to have, it's great to have your questions. Okay, black deaths in custody is a national crisis and emergency. What's the most effective strategy to get the Commonwealth, state and territory governments to act now? Stop deaths in custody. What do you think, Leah?
Well, it's black deaths in custody is certainly not going to end post-referendum. And I think a lot of the campaigning is and no doubt good intention allies, good intentions, what they perceive to be good intentions, they have this wet dream that we're going to live in this post-colonial utopia, post-referendum, and we're going to be united, and we're Aussie, 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 and it's just this amazing, it's so amazing. But nothing's going to end. Nothing that we deal with on the ground in our communities that our communities deal with is going to somehow disappear because we have an advisory body, as if we don't already have dozens. Sorry, I'm rereading it, so I actually answer this properly. I guess I'd start with the recommendations from the Royal Commission. I know Leah does amazing work trying to advocate for those recommendations to be implemented. That's a practical thing that this colony could be doing. Those are practical steps. Those recommendations have existed for 30 years now. Yeah. 30 years. And 500 plus deaths later, and so many of those deaths at the hands of, if those recommendations were implemented, hanging points, locking people up for public intoxication. There's so many recommendations where arresting someone is meant to be the last resort, but it's the first thing. The same as in our schools and how our schools and our education system from infancy really demonize, particularly our young black men. Where was I going with that? Sorry, guys. I don't speak like this too. This is not good. I don't know why. But so the way these systems are targeting our mob, and they target. I always fall back on our black men because I'm a mother of black sons. At the end of the day, I have sons, and I work with a lot of our mob in custody, and if those recommendations, just a fraction of those could be picked up and implemented, that's one thing we could practically be doing. But another thing would be, because we're not in jail, obviously, what can we do? We're not in there, we're not at that decision-making level, at the table making decisions, neither is that advisory body. It's not going to be at the decision-making table. But it comes from, I could say it comes from the over-policing and targeting of black communities and black children, our youth. But it starts for me when I reflect on my work and the work I do in my community. It's sooner than that contact with the justice system. It's that contact with the Australian education system and how the education system here in Australia is weaponized and sets black youth up to fail. That leads us in that line, that trajectory of our black kids in out-of-home care, because we do have the overrepresentation of black kids in out-of-home care is insane. And we talk about the stolen generations like it's a thing of the past, but it's actually happening today at far higher rates than it happened during the stolen generation years. But that the pipeline from, sorry guys, bear with me, the pipeline from out-of-home care and how our women are targeted by these systems like CYPS, I don't know what you folks call it in Victoria, but the child protection organisations, and our black women are targeted, our babies are taken, they're out of home, they're out of community, they're out of their culture. There's that disconnect, and then this trajectory onto youth detention, and then this trajectory into adult detention. And I feel like we were never meant to be here. Like a lot of a mob, like we weren't meant to be here. When I think of what Australia's end game was, we are just an inconvenience in the grand scheme of things because we weren't meant to survive. Ideally, we would have been wiped out. And then when that failed, ideally, we would have assimilated with those wide-strand policies and the removal of us and trying to bring blackness out.
They didn't do their job.
But so ideally, Australia actually really has done everything to get rid of us, and they haven't. Which is why I think it's so interesting that now we're being asked to sit here and put faith and trust that Labor of all parties, Labor is going to save us, and this once in a lifetime opportunity. But keep in mind, I'm 30, and I think there has been 4 opportunities for constitutional recognition pitched, marketed to mob in my lifetime. But this is a once in a lifetime opportunity. Like it's just when you actually understand the history of what's brought us to where we are today, and the fact that this campaign is being marketed, it's once in a lifetime to get it right and unite Australia. But like in our lifetime, and Uncle Robbie, I imagine you've been around a lot longer, like this is not a once in a lifetime, this is nonsense. And not once have I ever heard my elders on the streets marching and shouting for constitutional recognition. Ever. And I'm sure you mob here in Victoria, you mob down here, I know your rallies, you get tens of thousands, you get large numbers here in Melbourne for your rallies, in January and throughout the year too. In Canberra, it is what it is. But have you ever, anyone here in Melbourne, ever heard these grassroots mob, these elders, Uncle Robbie, ever get on that mic and ask for constitutional recognition? And that's just fascinating that this is being marketed to us like we asked for this, because that's what we're being told. We're being told that we asked for this. And I swear, I could be wrong, but I don't think I've ever been to a rally where we've asked for constitutional recognition or an advisory body. So I've gone off topic, but deaths in custody, there's things like, there's only so much we can do at a Commonwealth level because the jurisdictions fall within states and territories. I think it's going to begin. We're not going to fix the problem within the justice system. The justice system is not set up to fix any of these issues, which is leading people into contact with the justice system. And that's not going to be resolved in the same space. That's profits and has an entire industry in the incarceration of our mob. So we're not going to solve it through that avenue. We need to get in with all the other spaces and address homelessness, substance abuse, the overrepresentation of out-of-home care. There's so many other things that we should be, what's that saying, putting your eggs in a basket or whatever, instead of expecting this problem to be solved within the justice system. I don't think that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that's really good, and thank you, Leah, because as a young person too, you're finding your way in the world and working through it, and we need to hear everybody's opinion, and yeah, give it up for the And all of a sudden, it just is life, isn't it? You're thrown into different positions and taking on different roles. I mean, I know that I've worked with Robbie within the prison systems, and I've worked in the juvenile systems as well. And I've also, I take comedy into the prisons, just for the ladies and the gentlemen to have a laugh at the black eye, just being able to look at the world from the black eye in a funny way. But it is disgusting that we are such pearls, the longest living people. Everybody in the world has come to share our country. We have survived. We used to be 1% when I was growing up. We are now 3% because of us. We are brilliant breeders. And it is disgusting that we go to the prisons and we see such a high percentage locked up.
Like, how do you stop like this in custody? Stop locking us up. It's not rocket science.
That's it. So we need to have that looked at straight away. Deaths in custody, every time that should come up, you know, I'm thinking maybe we have to give every death in custody a state funeral. Every death in custody. I wonder how quick it will stop. There are ideas we've got to chuck out, man, to help these fellas deal with running a healthy society. I mean, we're not even talking about our education or our health system or our young people. Our young people dealing with mental health at the moment, let alone our trauma kids who've actually got a massive, disgusting history. Like, this is massive, and we need to be able to heal our country. And I think only Aboriginal people are offering something, but we need something before we can do that. And we need our people safe and have a look at our spirit and our society we would like to share with the world.
But we're dealing with a society and a government that criminalises us at every level. And when you look at a lot of our mobs, you know, what we're incarcerated for, it's because they've criminalised, and I think I was talking about this not that long ago, they've criminalised homelessness, they've criminalised mental health issues, they've criminalised just existing in this colony as a young black man. And these are, like, and this is what irritates me so much when we say the number of, you know, 500 plus deaths in custody, because that number doesn't, that's the tip of the iceberg, because there's so many deaths that happen in the community post-release.
Yes.
Deaths that happen, you know, it's just crazy when you can't, it's so hard to fathom the crime scene of this, that's exactly what I'm going to say, it's the crime scene of this colony. And how just exist in this colony as a black father, you are criminalized just to show up in this colony. Yes.
Welcome to our world.
And just considering that it's been 30 years since the Royal Commission. Yeah, there's all those recommendations. You know, what's going on there? Royal Commission means nothing. There's warehouses here of information from Royal Commissions going to dust, stolen. These are acts of genocide, clearly. So, you know, they're not going to do nothing. It's been 30 years. Our people are suffering from intergenerational trauma. Multiplied by 10. It's maxed out in terms of intergenerational trauma here. And when's that going to stop? Nothing's going to change. You know, I keep saying to myself, Australia's never really had a revolution, unless you're talking about Ballarat when they were revolting over a mining licence. And they've never had a revolution in this country, but they've always been revolting, disgusting and despicable. And when's that going to change? Australia are really proud of who they are and what they are. I mean, this is the truth of the history. This is who you are. This will be part of the history of the kids, you know. Rather than be like the South Africa of the Pacific Australia, step up. You know, the world's on fire. The oxygen's running out. You know, we're not going away. And the only thing that can save us is to recognise the true sovereigns of this land. Nothing's going to change otherwise. And we can stop them through the act of, everything here is a genocide. Everything about Australia is about genocide to me. I don't see anything other than genocide going on. So it's very clear. We need to get into the International Criminal Court for whatever it's worth. You know, I feel like the United Nations and these other international bodies are conspiring with Australia. And it's a very wealthy country. The rest of the world's feeding off the resources here, while they're keeping us where we are. We haven't got a voice. There's no political voice of Aboriginal people, is there? So I've got this token government-appointed voice. It's not our political voice. No. Here's the political voice. It's not token. It's not government-appointed. Now, we've got to get around all that stuff. And we can do it if people want to. Get out of your comfort zone. Step up because you're shaping your children's future right now. And I think it's very unhealthy in this country. It's a crime scene. There's nothing legal about it. Sooner or later, all is going to come to the fore. So where do you stand? Where do you stand in the land and the law here? To ask you that question. And one of the questions here, I'm going to go straight to this, is saying something about what happens when the corporate body is voting yes, but you want to support black sovereignty. Where do you go? Well,
That was good. That was going to be our last question for the day.
fine.
Perfectly.
I would say go and find out who the elders are, who are the bloodline, back to the territory. They're not being represented, but they're the true law of the land. So suppose they've got support. Because if these corporate bodies were misrepresented, and that's what's going on. And that's why there's a gap appearing, why there is. In the last 40 years, these corporations have been responsible for the gap. There's been a middle class black emerge in the last 40 years. All at the expense of their clientele they're supposed to be representing in terms of the welfare. That's where it's going. And it's by design. So we're destitute, not in a position to fight for our rights ever. But we're incredible people. I'm so amazed at the ability of our resistance and ability to maintain our dignity in all of this. Australia's a very lucky country up to this point. And things may change after this election because they've made a clear position on us. So we'll do whatever means necessary to liberate ourselves. And that may change. And things are changing. The world's changed. It's not this little isolated, out of sight, out of mind country anymore. Now the rest of the world is spotlight. And the world's breaking up. Now the United Nations is not the only boss around the place now. There's other things happening. Now our preferred partner, China, we can talk about our own satellite and our own ability to defend ourselves, can't we? Like New Guinea. They're doing deals with China. Why don't we? We can do that. This is our land, and we'll deal with whoever we want. And the coloniser here can, So think about that. They've never looked after us, this country, ever. Have a look at the history there. Look at it. Tried to destroy us at every turn. We're still here. We've got just cause, unceded sovereignty. We never gave consent to the occupation. And there's a whole history of war crimes here and crimes against humanity. So what do you want to do, Oz? Stick with the black sovereign movement. That's the answer. And make sure we've got the wherewithal and doesn't need much. We just need a bit of resources so we can facilitate what we need to do. And just recently, I've been talking to a lot of mob around the country, and we want to do a legal action in the International Criminal Court for whatever it's worth. So, and other people can get behind it. Not average people can. If the white man hasn't got jurisdiction over the Aboriginal people, he hasn't got it over anybody, right? Because this is our land, right? So people can argue the question about jurisdiction. If you walk into a court, ask the court, what jurisdiction is this here? First question, and see what they say. There's an argument, and everyone should be aware of it. So don't expect the Aboriginal Legal Service to actually help you on these circumstances. None of these organisations are there for that. In fact, they're the opposite. Childcare agencies, legal services, And even the health service, I used to love the health service, but I wouldn't piss on any of them if they was on fire. They're rubbish. And they've created this situation too. They're very much a part of what's going on today with this token voice offer thing. They're behind it all. And they're speaking on behalf of the Aboriginal people. And their corporate bodies, their directors and CEOs, which is it's corporate law, government-funded agendas. So hardly representative of Aboriginal people. They go around all that. Don't give them any credibility. It's just another corporate body. Why would you respect that? They're not Aboriginal. So I'm trying to answer that question about what to do where the corporate body is not acknowledging the sovereignty.
But it's also about local, I don't know when you fellas down here, but our local AMS in Canberra is endorsing the yes vote. But I think you just got to look at the funding behind those corporations, and they are Aboriginal organisations, but they are at the end of the day government funded. They receive federal funding or local funding,
And they're dependent.
and they are dependent, and they have to push that agenda. But I was just thinking of this really good footage that Auntie Isabel Coe did down at the Tent Embassy back in the 90s. If anyone's interested, it's on YouTube. I think you just type in like Aboriginal Tent Embassy interviews. And Auntie Isabel Coe spoke really well, and she predicted this back in the 90s and talked about how there was a push from all that movement, land rights movements in the 70s, and how they then arrived to the 90s. And they thought that they were going to push to get mob in these positions, in government positions, and get them behind enemy lines. And our mob, them elders, those are some of the most staunchest mob that fought so hard during the 60s and 70s, arrived to the 90s and thought that this was going to be a good thing. We got our mob behind these enemy lines, is what I think she called them. And in these government positions, ALO positions that exist because of the hard work that was fought for during the 60s and 70s in the land rights movements. But then she reflects on all these mob that got into these government positions and were meant to be representing our communities, and how that actually, it completely went downhill, and those mob that ended up in those positions just took that paycheck and deserted the community and what those roles were set up and established for. And I think that's so powerful, because she was talking about that in the 90s, and here we are 20 years later dealing with organisations that are manufacturing our consent and claiming to speak for us, but really they're not holding community consultations enough. And even though I believe we are the most consulted people on this planet, and the amount of recommendations that exist in a lot of these, like the Commission to Thirst in Custody, bringing home report, our Whereas Our Way, there's so many recommendations that exist because we are so over-consulted.
Did they call it consultation?
But they're just manufacturing our consent. So these organisations, I think that's actually a really valid question, is what do you do when your local AMSs or legal services are endorsing it? And I understand the conflict for non-Indigenous people to grapple with that, but understand that we're sitting here with no funding. The Progressive No has no funding, but we will not shift, and we can't be bought, and our consent can't be bought. And at the end of the day, that's authentic. And what we stand for hasn't shifted since the 60s or 70s, really, besides maybe treaty. I think a few of us have different views on treaty now, but really what we've stood for hasn't really shifted. We've been calling on the streets for land rights, for reparations, reparatory justice. So, and that's what those bodies, organisations, those black organisations were set up for. And unfortunately, they have lost their way. And that's not for any fault so much for their own, but we are dependent on government funding at the end of the day, because that's the economic system we are forced to live under.
And just quickly about the embassy, it has been the longest protest in the world. It's actually a protest. It's been going there since 72, and it was formed because, like in Canberra, every country from around the world has an embassy in Canberra they can go to. An embassy is a place that if the Australian government treats you like shit, you can go to your embassy and get heard and have a place to solve your problem. And you can question the Australian government. We only had the Australian embassy, and Aboriginal people were not being looked after by Australia. That is why we needed our own embassy established in Canberra. It took so much to keep it, and I just always give absolute congratulations to Aboriginal people for keeping that alive, because we also burn a sacred fire there. It's not just, you know, McDonald wrappers and plummet picket fences. It is native wood, and we keep that fire going through the whole time with a firekeeper. And then we look down straight across there to the War Memorial in Canberra, right down the end, and they've got gas burning, you know? And that's why I just think Aboriginal people, our protest site has been unreal, and where we are all connected in different ways to the embassy. But that was a place where we had to create our own space to have somewhere to go when the Australian government treats us like shit. That's what this is. We don't understand why they didn't go to the embassy to even have a yarn or consultation around all of the different countries of Australia, Aboriginal countries of Australia. Why didn't they do consultation?
Why didn't they trip out their front door up that hill at Parliament and roll down that hill?
Yes,
Take 5 little poxy steps.
that's
Say
right.
embassy
And
and get all the
talk
families,
about
get all the reps.
Around our sacred fire, where it would have been, you know.
But they knew they wouldn't have gotten out and said.
So we question that. Why didn't they do that? No, instead they're pushing it as if it was one of ours and we want. So it was really great to hear the clarity just come from here. And I hope that we have opened insight into how you're thinking to go on into the future. It's really important that we do. Any last thoughts from our panelists? We'll go through.
Yeah, just one more thing, just on that last question. Look, I'm not asking you to go out and listen to me because I'm a black folk. And anybody else, I'm not asking you to listen to them because they're a black folk. What we're asking you to do is listen to the analysis. The Yes campaign has buzzwords and slogans. They don't provide a detailed analysis. The racist no, same thing. No detailed analysis. Just slogans and buzzwords. We're here providing, and there's wealth of resources on the internet we're provided as well, providing actual analysis of this whole referendum process and what it means, its history, what sort of impacts it will have. That's what we're asking you to listen to. We're asking you to make your own choice based on the actual facts, not on, you know, some feel-good, happy words, not based on faith and hope, but based on the actual facts of the matter that's being provided. So if you're, you know, confused because you see a black folk voting yes and black folk voting no, use your brain. What's the right thing to do here? What's the actual facts of the situation? That's what we want you to do when you go out after tonight. You know, don't listen to people because they're black saying yes, don't listen to people because they're black saying no. Use your own brain, think about the actual facts, and make a decision from that.
I was just going to say that yes or no side, either way you go, just the same as, you know, the left wing or right wing of politics, Labour, Liberal, whatever, it's still birds of the same British pigeon. So I actually am encouraging, and you don't have to listen to me too, saying, you don't have to listen to me either, but I would just encourage people to actually, non-Indigenous people, to sit back and ask yourself why you actually think you have the right to make a decision for another sovereign people. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter what the blackfellow votes. Every blackfellow's country could vote no, and it would make no difference, because at the end of the day, we only make up 3%. So it doesn't matter what we ask for, what we vote. At the end of the day, is up to non-Indigenous people. And then once you sit and reflect on what gives you the right as a non-Indigenous person to determine the political future and role of another sovereign people in this country, just ask yourself, why do I have that right? Because you would never go to another country and get to vote on another sovereign person's right. If another country came here and took over, you wouldn't like it, but then they asked you, I'm not going to ramble because Keiran says it a lot better than I do, but yeah, you don't have the right. None of these people do not have the right to make that decision. I'm abstaining from it personally, and I encourage everyone to boycott it personally, but each to their own.
Leah House, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, great to see you. Thank you. Robbie.
Hey, I'm not going to tell anyone which way to vote. I just hope you're aware enough about which way to go on it yourselves. Democracy, that doesn't mean nothing to Aboriginal people. We're not a democracy. We don't have democracy. We already have established law. We didn't make it up as we go. It's been set in concrete from day one. Doesn't change for anybody. So we know when we grow up, we get brought into the law. It's not unchanging. And this is a law that stood the test of time successfully. So you can vote all you like, it's not going to make any difference, right? In the scheme, it will. It's an affront to us, it's an attack on our sovereign rights in this country. It's offensive. And people should think, well, if there's genocide going on in this country, which I think we explained here tonight, all those acts that define genocide Australia's guilty of, is being complicit in this whole process, knowingly slotting us into the back of this constitution. Is that another act of genocide by this entire country who are voting, knowingly demeaning and diminishing the rights of the original people in the process? So take that on board, and you can argue, no, I'm not going to participate in this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to vote no, even though I don't agree with any of it, but vote no in this situation. And that's the best thing you can do for Aboriginal people. That's the least you can do, is vote no. Other than a revolution. That's what we really want here. We need that. And there's a lot of attitude. That's the way we think. We don't accept this. We never have. We're not a part of the Constitution. We had an opportunity to be a part of it. It's conscious about what we're doing here. We're not going to assimilate. And despite the condition that we're in, we've lost a lot over the last 250 years out there, but we hold onto our spirit. And that's the true sovereignty of this land. And everyone should be thinking about protecting that, because that's what protects this land. And that's comes from our elders. Now, we have a system of law. Elders in council who are the bloodline back to the territory. You don't need to be talking to anybody else. At the end of the day, they're the sovereign peoples. So they don't get a look in this process. But that's what we represent here as Black Sovereign Movement. We've withstood the onslaught. And this seems like their final throw of the dice, this token voice, hoping that we will assimilate into it. We won't. And just before I finish this, I remember the native title legislation where they said, if you don't take this, you get nothing. It's the same what they do here. Every time they get something in front of us, it's the same old story. You've got to take it, you'll get nothing. I'd rather nothing. Rather than being tied up into that system. So, after the election, that's what it's about. Where we go from there. They're going to have their way here, it seems. I think there's been a lot of damage
You know, they've had all the resources in the world, they've bypassed an approach to all of this, mining companies behind them. They still can't get it up. They're impotent, right? With all of that power, you know, a small group of Aboriginal people, if the recognised campaign, with social media beat up all of that. And you'll notice in the last couple of years, they've cut us off from our social media, even the Aboriginal people. We're pretty good at it, about community, but that's all been cut down to. It's interference from internationals here, multinationals, interfering with our political voices, stopping us, stifling our voice. But we've still got the power to bring, the truth wins. Stick with the truth here, folks. That's the most powerful weapon we've got. And that'll destroy armies, governments, whoever. You can't defeat the truth. You've got to establish the truth first before you can grow or develop from anywhere. So it's truth first. And you can talk about anything else after that. But once you establish the truth, things will flow.
That's it. You know, my nan told me they tried to bury us. They didn't know we are the seeds. I just like to plant that for everybody to think about it, because we can change just by having the right ground and the right growth. Together we can do that. I'd love to thank everybody for coming here tonight. We have done movement just coming here today. I want to encourage, we've got the Stop Black Deaths in Custody on October the 7th at the State Library, 1 o'clock. Really important to be there. It's all these little things that we do in our community that really build it, and to have that strength in a great ground. Wish everybody the best. You heard it from our brilliant panelists here tonight. It is wonderful that we were able to come here and have our movement into the future stronger for our people and for our future. Thank you to the Black Sovereign Movement. It's so wonderful that we are here strong and standing for our elders and our spirit of the land. Thanks very much.